Okay. All right, we'll start. Perek Chof Gimel, chapter 23, which is in page Koyach, Chof Ches. Yeah, do you have it? Right, yeah. So it's the one opposite 54. So Chof Ches, okay. So it's a new chapter, but it's still part of this section of Tanya where we're getting to understand why, how we ignite the hidden love and the mysterious nefesh, the self-sacrifice, and understanding that we understood that the world is, number one, insignificant, part of the oneness of Hashem, but there's a tzimtzum, there's a hester, there's a concealment that Hashem conceals Himself. So to us it sounds like it's not. And last week we learned that there's pnimiyus haratzon, there's the inner essence of Hashem's will, like when a person does what he really wants to do, not the things that are bringing to what he wants to do. Then there's chitzonius haratzon, which is the external desire, and then there's elokim acherim. That's why Klippa is called elokim acherim, where even Klippa is getting life force, but it's like Hashem doing that because He wants bechira, but that's not what He wants. He doesn't want the Klippa. He wants our avodah. He wants our service of Hashem. So the chayes has been giving like throwing it over his shoulder, and he said that two things. So first of all, that number one, a lot of the life energy of Klippa is not interactive. It's not coming into the existence like other things. And even a little bit that is, because you have to have some chayas, but like it's in golos. In other words, it's like I gave you the example, he gave the example actually, of let's say when a neshama has a gilgul, a reincarnation into a behemoth, into an animal, the neshama is in the animal, but it can't be expressed. So too, the highest, the life force that Hashem gives Klippa is in the little bit is in the Klippa, but it can't be, it's not expressed. So it's completely hidden. That's why it's all part of the Kimachirim. It's all part of the Achurayim of the Ratzon, the backhanded Ratzon that Hashem has. He gives it chayes because He wants it to exist. So we should have free choice. We should have the struggle and free choice, but that's not what He really wants. Okay. So then he says like this: Im kol anal. That's all we said before. Yuvan v'yavur heitev. We're gonna, and it'll be understood and well explained, but toisus spirit with extra explanation. Masha Omru b'Zohar, what the Zohar says, D'oraisa v'kutsha brichu kulachad. So he's going to bring two things. In this parak, he's going to talk about the relationship we have with mitzvahs and with Torah. We'll see that in this parak, Torah, learning Torah is a bit deeper than mitzvahs, although mitzvahs have its other advantages that Torah doesn't have, but in terms of this concept. So, with regard to Torah, the Zohar says, D'oraisa v'kutsha brichu kulachad. Right? The Torah and Hashem are one. Meaning, they're inseparable, they're one thing. Ubetikunim, and in Tikunim, which another section of the Zohar says, Pirushu, there are mach pikudin, the 248 mitzvahs that we're supposed to do. Inun ramach evrin de malka. They are called 248 limbs of the king. Which is an interesting thing, right? It means that a mitzvah that we do is like an organ of Hashem. There's 248 mitzvahs in the Torah. So therefore, just like we have 248 limbs, so these are the limbs of Hashem, which we have to understand what that means, but he's going to explain. Okay. Now, he's going to start with mitzvahs. He says like this. First of all, what do we say there? In other words, basically these two sayings are really relating and representing the oneness, the deep connection that Torah and mitzvahs has with Hashem. With Torah, we use the expression Torah and Hashem is one. With mitzvahs, we use the expression it's like a limb to a neshama, to a person. What does all this mean? It says like this: the fee, mitzvahs hem pnimiyus ratzon elyon v'cheftzei ha'amiti. Mitzvahs is what we call pnimiyus ratzon. That's what Hashem really wants. That's an expression of Hashem's real ratzon, right? Hamelubish b'chol ha'olamis. That ratzon is enclosed in all the worlds. Elyonim v'tachtonim lachayosim. The real chayes of the world, the real ratzon of Hashem is through mitzvahs, right? That's the mission of creation. That's the purpose of creation. Anything else that exists, even things that aren't directly klippa, but they're not mitzvahs, they might not be achurayim, like the backhanded desire, but they certainly chitzonius ratzon. It's still external, right? It's like I gave you the analogy: if someone's working in order to feed his family, he might enjoy his work. It might be very good. It's not a backhanded thing. It's not bad, but it's not. He's tachlis. Tachlis is able to provide for his family. That's where his real ratzon is, right? That's why he went to work in the first place. Yeah. So in other words, working in that analogy is at the end of the day, it might be something he really enjoys and he's good at it and he doesn't mind going and all that kind of stuff, but it's still an intermediary to something else. It's not who he is, right? In other words, Gechol chayusom v'shifam, at the end of the day, the entire life force and the entire flow of everything that exists, tolui b'maiseh mitzvah shel hatachtonim kenoida. It actually depends on the mitzvahs. It depends on the mitzvahs that we do. If you want to have a real good chayes, proper chayes, not anything to do with klippa, not anything to do with hidden chayes or tzimtzum or the life force being in golus and all that kind of stuff, it has to be connected with the pnimius ratzon of Hashem. And the pnimius ratzon of Hashem is mitzvahs, right? That's what's fueling the chayes at the end of the day of the world, right? Just a little bit of comment on ratzon, right? Just what is ratzon? We're talking about the pnimius ratzon, the chitzonius ratzon, right? In Chassidus it says by a person, we have this thing, mipsari echselaka. From looking at ourselves, we can understand a little bit how things work with Hashem. Not that we understand Hashem, we don't understand anything about Hashem, but we understand why certain things are called certain things, other things are called something else, right? So you look at us, right? Ratzon is not just a stronger koyach amongst other koyachas. In other words, like this. When Hashem created us, He created us with powers, with koyachas. Chochmah, the power to understand wisdom, the power to understand BINA, the power to do chesed, the power to do gvura, whatever, all these different powers, right? And that's why each koyach has, it's called koyachas pnimim, each koyach has its place in the body where it expresses itself. So we express understanding through thinking, we express emotion through the heart, we express the idea to be able to write through our hands, all these different things. Eye to see, yeah? Okay. Then we say there's ratzon. Ratzon is very strong. Ratzon is the will that motivates us to do things, and that's not interactive with the body, it's makif, it's more transcendent and it's strong and it's powerful, and that's what's pulling us to do whatever we do, right? Like we say, Ein lecha dover ha'oimed b'fnei ratzon, nothing stands in the way of a will, right? In the way of a desire. Or to use modern language, where there's a will, there's a way, right? Why? Because if you really want something, that's what you want. Okay. However, it's not just that, it's more than that. When we say, let's say, a person has the power to write, right? Power to see, a power to do chesed, a power to have chachma. That power is an expression of the neshama. It's not the neshama itself. Now, we know a person can decide not. He doesn't need to understand. He doesn't need to do things, right? He doesn't need to understand. He can close his eyes. He doesn't want to see that. Hasn't affected his essential living. He's not still existing, still alive, right? Chassidus refers to ratzon, real ratzon, meaning ratzon is what we call hatoyas hanefesh. Ratzon is always connected to something else because I want something, but it's the neshama wanting. In other words, it's the expression of the neshama itself. In other words, what a person really wants. Now, when we talk about ratzon, we also have to differentiate. There are different kinds of desires. There are desires that people have desires because they've worked out certain things in their brain. That's something else. That's a ratzon that comes from seichel. But a person is born with certain intrinsic desires. One of the analogies that gives the Chassidus is a person is born with the desire to have a roof over his head, to have a bais. Right? Kol mi she'ein le bais, ein le odom. A person doesn't have a house, he's not a person. Not because he worked out that it's going to be cold or whenever to sleep, or it'll be under the sky or it might rain. That's not the point. But that's an intrinsic desire of the person. It's an expression of the person himself. Right? Yeah, you look confused. Yeah, you good? Same thing, when we talk about mitzvahs being the ratzon of Hashem, right? Or not only the ratzon of Hashem, but the pnimius of the Ratzon of Hashem, right? That's an expression of Hashem. That's what it means. It's who Hashem is. That's the Gilu. That's the revelation of Hashem. Which, by the way, has nothing to do with this period, but it explains something that also explains the Chassidus, which people find very difficult to grasp because we're just rational people, so it's hard for us to grasp these kind of things. But you know, we have in mitzvahs, for example, different mitzvahs. We have mitzvahs that are chukim, mitzvah mishpatim, right? Mishpatim have reasons. Mitzvahs chukim don't have a reason, right? What's the pshat in that chukim don't have a reason? Does it mean there is a reason we just don't understand it? That's one way to understand it. Sometimes we say there are reasons in the higher world, but there's no reason that can relate to the human brain. Okay. So in the world of Bria, there's a reason. In the world of Atzilus, there's a reason, right? That's why Shlomo HaMelech can understand some of the chukim. He was able to, he's so wise, he could lift himself up higher than human logic and understand these things. But actually, Chassidus says, in particular with regard to the Parah Adumah, that actually there's a deeper pshat in chukim. Deep pshat in chukim is that there is no reason. Not pshat, there's a reason, we just don't know what it is. There is no reason. So, why would Hashem tell us something without a reason? Right? Pshat is no, it's higher than reason. It's Hashem. It's who He is. He expresses itself in that mitzvah. Right? Yeah? It's a very deep thing. It's the and the truth is, we learn that all mitzvahs are the Ratzon of Hashem. When we say the mitzvah have a reason or a reason in the higher worlds, or a reason that we can understand, it actually comes later. There's certain mitzvahs that Hashem allow, all the mitzvahs start with the Ratzon of Hashem. That's why the Rebbe Rashab famously said in Torah Shalom, he said, Kol ha-mitzvahs misyachsim elo atzmos. All the mitzvahs go back to the essence of Hashem. Atzmos of Hashem. Why? Because mitzvahs are Ratzon. Mitzvahs are the Ratzon of Hashem. Pnimis Ratzon. Some mitzvahs Hashem allowed to evolve into a reason. Right? Which is, by the way, a very interesting perspective on keeping mitzvahs. Why do we keep kibbut aveim? Because it makes sense? No. You know Chassidus, you understand it's the other way around. The reason that there's a mitzvah in the Torah not to steal, it's not because it makes sense, because you can't have a society without stealing. That's not the reason. It is the reason, but that's not why there's a mitzvah not to steal. The mitzvah not to steal is because it's a mitzvah Hashem. That's why. It happens to be, it's one of the mitzvahs that translated and evolved into the human rationale. Okay, so Taka makes sense. The way Hashem structured the society, the way He structured this mitzvah, the way He allowed this mitzvah to evolve and to come down, there's also a reason. But that's not why we keep it. And that's a very important perspective on the mitzvah. Actually, we're supposed to keep every mitzvah because it's a chok. All mitzvah chukim. But by the Chanukah Mamorim, it always talks about what we say in Alanissim, that the Greeks wanted to take us away mechukei retzonecha, from the chukim of your ratzon. So it explains not only referring to the chukim, it's referring to every mitzvah. Even the mitzvahs they didn't mind that we keep because it was rational or cultural, whatever the case is, but they didn't want us to keep it because Hashem said so. And really we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to keep every mitzvah only because Hashem said so. We're also supposed to understand it. When the understanding is given, Hashem wants us to understand. That's a separate story. It's not the reason why maybe it gives us more chayes, it gives us whatever it is. It means it brings our brain along and our heart along, all good. But that's not the foundation of why we keep it. Why we keep it is because we say, Nasva Nishma, we'll do whatever Hashem wants, and it's the mitzvah of Hashem, that's why we keep it. Because that's where it started. It didn't even start from the reason. No mitzvah is an outcome of reason. You understand? Every mitzvah is a rotzen of Hashem. Some rotzen, some retzonos evolved into seichel as well. Yeah, it's an important perspective. Okay. He says, that's the case, and therefore that's the pnimis rotzen of Hashem, and therefore on that depends the whole chayes of the world, the whole existence of the world really is therefore dependent on the rotzen of Hashem. L'chei nikroim evrei de malka. Right? That's why they're called the limbs of the king. Why? It says like this. What does that mean? Derech Moshe. Let's give a Moshe. K'moishe evrei gufa adam. Right? Heim levush lenafsho yubeteilim legamrei eleo mikol v'kol. Chassidus explains like this: that a person has a guf and a neshama, right? There's a famous mashal that Chassidus brings, which is hard to understand scientifically. But anyway, we'll say it the way Chassidus says it. All right. So Chassidus says like this: that The Eibishter gave a neshama and a guf, right? The neshama we know is a lavush of the guf, it's a garment of the guf. But actually the neshama is completely bottled to the guf. Sorry, other way around. The guf is completely bottled to the neshama. The body of the person is completely guided and run and completely bottled to the neshama. Right? Neshama and the guf become one thing. What's the mashal? Mashal is, Abish gave us a neshama. Neshama has certain powers, plus including rotzen, right? So when we have a rotzen, let's say a person has a rotzen to move his foot suddenly, right? It will happen instantaneously. Without any delay. Why? Because as soon as the neshama wants that, that's what happens. It just happens automatically. Right? Why I say scientifically it's hard to explain, because this always says it doesn't go through the brain, because otherwise it would take time till it went to the foot. Okay? Science doesn't agree with that, whatever that means. Whatever Chassidus means by that. But that's the mashal, right? So therefore, right? What does that mean? It's completely bottled to the neshama, to the nefesh. As soon as a person has a desire to move his hand or to move his foot, the guf right away obeys. Without any command, without instruction, without any delay. Right? As soon as he has the ratzon, it happens. Which is even much deeper, much more one, and much more bottled than, let's say, a slave to his master. A slave to his master also very bottled, also very surrendered. But it's different because they're two separate things. So in other words, when a master tells a servant, a slave, to do something, it's still a conscious decision for the slave to choose to do it. Right? Okay, maybe it's forced, maybe whatever the case is, but it doesn't matter. But it's not one. The levush, the nefesh, and the guf is one. Therefore, as soon as the nefesh says, boom, it's done right away. Right? So let's continue. He says, if that's the case, Kain derech moshul, kach derech moshul. The same thing is with a chayes shel ma'aser mitzvah kiyum. The chayes, the life force. Right? When you do a mitzvah, it's an action, right? The mitzvah is gizis. Mitzvah has to be done. There's a chayes, there's a life force in the mitzvah that allows it to happen, that allows it to be done, right? That life force who batal legamri legabi rotzen elam elushboy. That chayes in a mitzvah is not something separate from Hashem. It's completely bottled, just like the guf, just like the limbs of our body are completely bottled to the desires of the nefesh. So too the chayes in the mitzvah, and the mitzvah itself really, is completely bottled to the rotzen of Hashem. That's why mitzvahs are called limbs. They're just expressions of the rotzen of Hashem, right? Which is completely different to the chayes in any other thing. In chitzonius rotzen and in rotzen of klipa, of acharai, in the backhanded rotzen, it's different because that's not completely bottled. Because that's not real. That's not the real rotzen of Hashem, right? When it's the real rotzen of Hashem, then the chayes of the mitzvahs, which is the rotzen of Hashem, is one with the rotzen. It's like the guf versus the neshama, right? V'nase mamish v'nase loy becomes the chayes of the mitzvah becomes mamish ke guf le neshama, becomes mamish like the body to the neshama. In a revealed way, because obviously the truth is we know that everything in the world is bottled to Hashem. We're talking about in a conscious way. The chayes and Hashem are inseparable in a revealed way. They're not. It's one with the rotzen. It's an expression of the rotzen of Hashem. Right? Therefore, anything in the world, right? Anything in the world where it becomes apparent that thing in the world is mamish the rotzen, the pnimius the rotzen of Hashem, it's part of a mitzvah, it just becomes an expression of Hashem, becomes one with Hashem. Right? So therefore, when a person does a mitzvah, why does a person do a mitzvah? A person does a mitzvah because he wants to fulfill the Ratzon of Hashem, right? As we said before, that's the real depth of how you do a mitzvah. Yeah? By the way, that's connected with last week's parasha, Nasa v'nishma, right? Nasa means we'll just do, because we want to do the mitzvah, we want to do the Ratzon of Hashem for no reason. Because it's, yeah? Therefore, what in that doing the mitzvah, Hashem is completely revealed there, because that mitzvah is completely one with, it's an expression of the Ratzon of Hashem. Yeah? That's why the mitzvahs are called the limbs of the king. Just like the limbs of a body are completely bottled to the Ratzon of the nefesh, so to the mitzvahs are completely bottled to Hashem. He says more than that, he says like this. Now I'm just going to give a bit of introduction to the next thing. Now he's going to talk about, there's the mitzvah, and then there's the power within the person to do the mitzvah. Right? What is that? So we know we learned in the beginning of Tanya, we have 3 levushim. There's 3 ways a human being expresses himself, right? Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa. Machshava and Dibur are deeper, they're much more one with the person. Maisa is called the most external levush, right? Because when we do something, it's detached from us. We do something and we leave it there, right? It's not, yeah? So he says, when a person has a levush, and it's the most external, the superficial levush, with that levush, he does a mitzvah, with the koyach hamaisa, with the power of action, that's how we do a mitzvah. We light a Shabbos candle, there's a levush in the person, there's the mitzvah of the Shabbos candle, which is one with Hashem, bottled to Hashem, like a limb to a body, a limb to a nefesh, right? Then there's your power, your levush, which is your most external levush, that is lining the Shabbos candle, correct? He says, even the most external levush of the nefesh elokis, in the person that's doing, fulfilling and doing the mitzvah, which is the power and the level of action, that power also mislabish mitzvah. That energy that's in your power of Maisa, the Maisa of the Nefesh Elokis that's now doing the mitzvah, becomes also enclosed and completely one with the mitzvah itself. It also becomes like a body to a neshama, right? The Ratzon alien to the Ratzon of Hashem, and it's completely bottled to Hashem in that, right? In other words, not only is the highest in the mitzvah considered the limb of Hashem, but even your power of Maisa to do the mitzvahs becomes like an aver, becomes like a limb to Hashem, and is as bottled to the Ratzon of Hashem as a body is bottled to the nefesh. And then he says even more. Ve'al kain, and therefore, gam evrei gufa odam ha'makayim mitzvah. Therefore, even the limb that's doing the mitzvah, shekoyach u'bechinas ha'maisa shel nefesh elokis melugush b'hem mishas maisa v'kiyum mitzvah. Even the limb, in other words, you're lighting a Shabbos candle, so there's the power of Maisa. But where does the power of Maisa, where does the power of action express itself in this instance? In the hand, right? It's expressed itself in the hand to do what? To do and become one and to follow and to become bottled to the Ratzon of Hashem, the Pnimius Ratzon, right? So those nasu merkava mamish the Ratzon elim. Even your limbs become a merkava. What does a merkava mean? Like a chariot, right? So we have this moshel in Chassidus that we have a famous thing that the Avos, our forefathers, were a merkava to Elokus. They were like wagons to Hashem. What does that mean? A wagon has no independent will, correct? To be a merkava to Elokus is a very high madrega, because it has a chariot has no independent will. What does it do? It does what the master tells it to do, what the driver tells it to do, right? So the Avos, we say that generally in their whole life they became like that, right? Not just when you do mitzvah, I'm saying the whole life they were merkava, they were like chariots to Hashem. In other words, they trained themselves, whatever Hashem does, Hashem wants, they do. They don't have an independent rasa. They just are vehicles for the driver, who is Hashem, right? I think I've shared with you this word before. I'll just tell you an interesting little word, but so he just brings it out a little bit. The famous thing in Parshas Vayera. In Parshas Vayera, we know that Avraham Avinu was talking to Hashem, and then the Malachim arrived, right? So Avraham Avinu interrupted Hashem, and he said, "I'm just going to go take care of the guests," right? That's what the Chumash says. So the Gemara says, from here we learn that being hospitable to guests is greater than receiving the Shekhinah. How do we know? Because Avraham Avinu was busy talking to Hashem. He was receiving the divine presence, and he interrupted him to go and take care of the guests. So we see that's the right thing to do. So we learn that mamash, it's machlas tzorchim is so great. It's even greater than having a revelation of the Shekhinah. Right? The famous question is, that's very nice. We know that from Avraham Avinu, but how did he know that? Right? We know because he did it, so we follow him, we trust him. But how did he know it? Like what taka did he interrupt Hashem? How did he know that machlas tzorchim is greater? Answer is because he felt himself leaving, felt himself interrupting Hashem. He was so in tune, he was so trained to be a merkava to Elokus that he knew that if he's feeding himself, that's what he wants to do. That's the only time you can trust your instinct. If you're a merkava to Elokus, like Avraham Avinu, everyone thinks that you have to trust your gut. That's a lot of nonsense. You don't trust your gut. Your gut can be nefesh habamis, right? We have 20 guts. Could be nefesh habamis, nefesh hasichlis. Who knows where it's coming from? Yeshus, bittul. Got to be very careful before we say we trust our instincts, right? Today it's very popular. You trust your instincts. Not always. But Avraham Avinu could trust Taka because he only had one instinct. He was completely a chariot of Hashem, right? Once I'm already in the word, I'll just finish it because I heard this word from my father when I was in high school. And I remember he told me this word. He said that actually in Parshas Vayera explains something at the end of the parsha. Because once it didn't work for Avraham Avinu by design. Hashem hid something from him. What happened? It says by the Akedah, it says, I've shared this before, right? I think so. Anyway, it says by the Akedah, Avraham Avinu took Yitzchak to the Akedah and he put him on the Mizbeach. And then it says, Vayishlach es yodeh, he sent his hand to get the knife to Shecht Yitzchak. Right? What kind of expression is he sent his hand? Should I say he took the knife? What do you mean? Should I say he took the knife? Then the Malach called out and said, stop. He sent his hand, Vayishlach es yodeh. It's a very funny expression. Teretz is like this. What happened was over here, there was a big mix-up. Why? Hashem actually didn't want Avraham Avinu to Shecht Yitzchak. It was never the will of Hashem. But he couldn't tell that to Avraham Avinu, otherwise undermine the whole Akedah. So that time, the will of Hashem had to be hidden from Avraham Avinu. Comes the Akedah, Avraham Avinu puts Yitzchak on the Mizbeach. Next step is to take the knife for Avraham Avinu. That should have been a natural reaction. Because he was a merkava to Elokus. And somehow it's not working. His hand's not moving. Avraham Avinu was upset. What's going on here? I want to do the Ratzon of Hashem, and I'm slipping up. My body does whatever Hashem wants. And it didn't work. So Vayishlach es yodeh. He had to send his hand, to force his hand. Why? He thought because this time it's not working. His merkava is missing. But the actual fact was it wasn't missing. Because because right away, 2 seconds later, it became apparent. Because what happened was, the Ratzon of Hashem was not to Shecht Yitzchak. It was to think he's in the Shecht Yitzchak, but it wasn't actually Shecht Yitzchak. But he couldn't tell him because otherwise they wouldn't be the test, right? So therefore, his hand didn't go because Takar wasn't the Ratzon of Hashem, right? Okay, that's the Merkava. Says Tanya here, amazing thing. Says that the not just the chayes in the mitzvah, not just the chayes, not just the power of action, but even the hand where the action is working through also becomes bottled to the pnimiyas haratzon of Hashem. It's an amazing thing. I don't know if you ever think about it like that. We do a mitzvah, right? To think that at that moment, the hand that we're doing the mitzvah with, or whatever part of the body we're doing the mitzvah with, is mamash becoming a merkava to Elokus. Because why? Because it's being connected to the pnimiyas haratzon of Hashem. So it's the greatest bittul. The only thing is, you'll notice he changes when it comes to the actual part of the body. He changes the language a little bit. When it came to the life force that's in the koyach hamaisa of the nefesh elokis, or the mitzvah itself, there it says like the body to the neshama, right? When it comes to the part of the body, he says, it becomes a merkava to Elokus. Because at the end of the day, the body's different. The body's still a separate thing. But it goes like this. There's explaining to the Mefarshim that there's like 3 levels. There's like we call the body to the neshama. That's like one thing. It's completely bottled. It's not even 2 things that are. It's not 2 things that are working together. It's one thing really. The body is just an expression of what the neshama wants, the nefesh wants, right? That's one level. Then there's a Merkava to Lakus. The Merkava and the Lakus, the Merkava and the rider are the Merkava is completely bottled to the rider, but it's still separate. It's not one mamash, right? And you have like the slave and the master, which I said before. That's like a not bottle. That's just because there's a difference. He'll do whatever the master wants, but it's a choice, right? Okay. So when it comes to the body, it doesn't say like the guf to the neshama. Guf to the neshama is a complete oneness, but it's still amazing. It means that your hand giving tzedakah or your hand drying candles, mamash, it's bottled to Hashem, like at least like a Merkava, like a Ramavina, right? Because nefesh is more connected to the Maisa. We're talking about the power of action. You know, there's different levels in the neshama, right? Sorry? No, it's bottled. Depends which neshama we're talking about. Depends what you're talking about. Yeah, in other words, if a person moves... Sorry? Yeah, because because there the guf is becoming bottled to a different neshama. It's not Shabbamis. But in other words, we're saying just generally, he's talking about a general thing about a person has a desire to do something. It can be anything. And it'll happen automatically because the guf is just a vehicle, maybe of both neshamas, but it's a vehicle of the neshama. It's just an expression of the neshama. Obviously, you make the choice that it should become an expression of the rotzen of nefesh, the kiss. That's the idea. But
it's not using nefesh.
No, you're using it as an analogy. Guf, when Hashem gave a neshama to the body, you're talking about the neshama that gives chayas, that gives life to the body. You're not talking about the kiss now, animal, godly. You're not talking about that. You're talking about the neshama that gives chayas to the body. So you can't separate that from the guf. The guf's one thing with that. That's his analogy. If you want to move your hand, you move it right away because that's the body just operating as an expression of the nefesh. That's why he uses the lashon of nefesh.
But it's very intentionally using the lowest level.
Yeah, because it means he's talking about like operationally. Yeah. Okay. So he says, for example, Kagon, for example, Hayad HaMachalekas Dokalani, a hand that gives out tzedakah to the poor, or does another mitzvah. V'raglayim, or the feet, HaMahalchas Lidvar mitzvah, or the feet that are going to do a mitzvah. V'chein HaPeh v'al-loshen shemedabrim Torah. Yeah. Or the mouth, that's the mouth or the tongue that is talking words of Torah. V'amoyach, or the brain shemahara b'divrei Torah v'yirah that he's thinking about Torah, or he's thinking about Yirah Shamayim, or Gedulas Hashem, or the greatness of Hashem Baruch Hu. Right? These all become merkava to a lakus. And this is what Chazal say, that our avos heinen merkava. The forefathers, they were always in merkava. They were constantly in merkava. Why? Because always shakol evareim kulam hayu kedoshim, because their limbs and their organs were holy, and completely detached from worldly matters, and their body was an exclusive, exclusive merkava, to the supernal will of Hashem all the days of our life. With us, it's only when we choose to do a mitzvah, then our body becomes a merkava to the kus, which is also amazing. It's unbelievable, right? But the others were merkava in their whole essence because they had completely gotten rid of any other interfering influences, right? So therefore, the entire body was holy and detached from worldly stuff, and they were just chariots of Hashem's ratzon. So, in summary, what happens is it's a chain reaction here. So the mitzvah is pnimius ratzon of Hashem, and therefore everything that's connected to the mitzvah becomes an expression of that ratzon, including, this is the chiddush here, including even the physical body, the physical organ that does the mitzvah. It's not mamash one like a guf and a neshama, but it's at least like a merkava. Why? Because it's all the expression, it's all facilitating the real ratzon of Hashem, the pnimis ratzon. That is not true with anything else. It's not true with any other thing that we do, any other choice that we do. We might become a merkava to bad things, but we're not connecting to Hashem at all then. We're still kept alive by Hashem, but it's a lower level of chayes, a lower level of energy. That's what we're trying to talk about in the last parak. It's a different chayes. The real chayes, the real life force of the world is mitzvahs and Torah. Because that's pnimis, that's what Hashem really wants. Then he continues on like this, says, now he's going to talk about Torah. What he's going to talk about is that Torah is actually even higher than mitzvahs in that regard. Okay, it says the following. When it comes to thinking, right? Machshava, or thinking and divrei Torah in our brain, or when we speak Torah with our mouths, these are considered the internal garments of the neshama, not just external. action is external, but machshava and dibur are more internal. Right. Then what happens is our neshama powers become mamish one with Hashem. Not just a merkava, not just bottled to, not just an expression of, but mamish one. This goes back, of course, to what Alter Rebbe explained in the very beginning of Tanya, in the fifth chapter, about the greatness of learning Torah, right? But this yichud, this oneness, can only happen in the more internal levushim, like machshav and dibur, as opposed to action. Action is more detached, and therefore action is oneness, but not as one as when we learn Torah. For kol shekei, not only the levushim of the nefesh lakis of speech and thought, but how much more so the nefesh lakis atzma malubeshet, how much more so the godly soul itself that is enclosed in these things, right? There we say kulam miyuchadim mamish beyichud gomor. They all become mamish one with the Beratzon Elyon, with the Ratzon of Hashem. The loy merkava bilvad, not just a merkava, not just a chariot, more than chariot. At the end of the day, a chariot is still separate, right? Ki Ratzon Elyon hu advar alocha atzos maharabo medamabo. Because when you're thinking about something in Torah, right? When you think about a mitzvah, you're thinking about doing the mitzvah. You're not thinking the mitzvah itself. The thinking is not the mitzvah. It's the bittul to the mitzvah. When you're thinking Torah, when you learn Torah, you learn the Torah of a mitzvah, you're not thinking about the Ratzon Elyon, you're thinking the Ratzon Elyon. That's your thought. Your thought is thinking Ratzon, thinking Hashem's Ratzon. Right? I saw you, and I'm looking at the Sefer, Tchilas Muveres. He gives a good mashal. He says like this. It's like when you think about building a house, right? So a house is very much a pnimius ratzon of a person. Let's just say, okay, you need to have a house. It's considered one of the deepest retzonos. That's what it says, right? So of course, when you build a house, then your ratzon is being expressed, correct? But it's hard to say that the building itself is mamish part of your ratzon. Building is achieving the ratzon and bottle to the ratzon. But it's hard to say that is the ratzon. But the ratzon is not building the house. The ratzon is having the house. The house, that's the ratzon, right? However, that's when you think about building the house. However, when you think about the house itself, you think about how big the house is going to be, how many rooms it's going to have, what it's going to look like. There you're actually thinking about the ratzon itself. Nothing about building, you're thinking about the house itself. Same thing. When you think about doing a mitzvah, you're thinking about the building of the house, which is also an amazing thing. You're building out, connecting to the Ratzon of Hashem, and when you do it, you become like a merkava to the Ratzon of Hashem. When you're thinking Torah, you're thinking not about you're thinking the Ratzon of Hashem. That's what you're thinking about. You're learning about a korban, you're learning about a tefillin, you're learning about a mezuzah. You're learning the Ratzon of Hashem. You're one with the Ratzon of Hashem, more than even the merkava. Shekol, that's what he says. Shekol ha'halachas, all the halachas. Heim protei ha'machshoches pnimis ratzon elim baruch hu. Ratzon elim atzmai. Because all the halachas you're learning about and all the aspects you're learning about are all different parts of the Ratzon Elyon. Means shekach ola b'ritzoynu, you're learning what is the Ratzon Hashem. Yisbarach shadavar zeh mutter, this thing is mutter, or kosher, or potter, or zaka, or lehepech. You're thinking this thing is okay to do, this thing is kosher, this thing is yabzol. This one you're innocent of chas v'shalom, the other way around, right? So you're thinking mamash the Ratzon of Hashem, because every detail and every mitzvah is the Ratzon Hashem. If you learn about the kashrus of an animal, that only when you take the blood out of an animal becomes kosher. Let's say you're thinking this is the Ratzon of Hashem, right? It's part of the 630 mitzvahs. So you mamash becoming one, not just to the Ratzon of Hashem, but the Ratzon of Hashem itself. Kol shekein tzirufi oisis Tanakh. Same thing, we learn the words of Tanakh, you learn the words of the Torah. You're learning Hashem's expression, you're learning Hashem's words. Which are completely one with Hashem, with the ultimate oneness. We know that Hashem and His Chochmah are mamash one, and that's what the Zohar says. And he says like this, that's why the Zohar says Torah and Hashem are one. Loi Evrin the Malka, and not just limbs to a soul, right? Not just organs are bottled to a neshama, but the neshama itself. In other words, mamash one with Hashem. So that's the difference between Torah and mitzvahs. Now, obviously, the tachlis is mitzvahs, right? The Pirkei Avos says, "Kol ha'omer ein li ela Torah." If someone says, "I only have Torah, I don't do anything else," then he doesn't even have Torah, right? In other words, yes, it's true that there's a certain level of bittul to the Ratzon Elyon with Torah that is greater than a mitzvah even. That's why that's the greatness of learning Torah. That's why we talk about the greatness of learning Torah. And that's why we have in Chazal, for example, about can you take off time from learning Torah to do a mitzvah? So the answer is yes. I mean, it depends when. Let's say I'm talking about a person who's really steeped in Torah, not the person who spends 5 minutes a day learning Torah, then all of a sudden can't do a mitzvah because he's learning Torah, right? We're talking about someone whose Torah is his profession. So it's always a shayla. Can you get right? So the answer, the halacha says that it depends what kind of mitzvah it is. If it's a mitzvah she'ef shalasas al de'acherim, if it's a mitzvah that can't be done through someone else, then the person has to stop and do the mitzvah. But if it can be done someone else, there's an option if the person is not learning Torah to do the mitzvah. I don't know, a project, someone needs help, whatever the case, right? If someone who's not learning anyways to do the mitzvah, which would then help him not to do the mitzvah, then he should continue learning Torah. Why? Because there is a greatness of learning Torah. On the other hand, and by the way, that includes all the mitzvahs that everyone has to do. In other words, he has to stop, to fill in, to daven, right? Okay. On the other hand, there is an advantage of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs show the real bittul to Hashem in a different way. The fact that you're surrendering your action to Hashem, and that you're doing what the Torah tells you to do. In other words, it's not very good saying that when you learn about Torah, you are thinking you are bottled to the Ratzon itself. But the only bottle of the Ratzon itself if the Ratzon has an outcome, right? There's a famous Gemara, right? The Gemara says, it's a very cryptic Gemara. The Gemara says they had a discussion, what's greater, Talmud or Maisa? Learning or action? Similar sort of thing, right? Nimnu v'gamru, they made a vote and they decided, learning is greater. Why? Because it brings to action. That means action is bigger, right? So there's that's what I'm saying. So, but over here is bringing out the depth of Torah, the bittul of your brain, of your power of thought, of yourself to Hashem, the connection to Hashem that is created learning Torah is even deeper than to a merkava or even a body to a nefesh. It's mamash the raisa kuchabrichu kulachad. It's mamash one thing, right? He says therefore, not only that, he says, and since when you learn Torah you do mitzvahs. The Ratzon or the Ratzon of Hashem is mamish like is revealed begilo the gamri loy behester upon him klal klal. It's not hidden at all. Right? When a person does a mitzvah, when he puts on tefillin, he writes a Shabbos candle, he puts on mezuzah, the Ratzon or Elin is revealed, right? It's revealed in the neshama, and the levushim of the neshama, the garments of the neshama, shemachshava v'dibura. We talk about learning Torah now. At that time when a person is learning Torah, right? He says, Harigama nefesh ulevushel elu miyuchadim mamish ein sof baruchu ba'oisa shah b'tachlis hayichud. Because of that, that means your nefesh and your neshama at that moment is mamish one with Hashem. Because if you become one with the Ratzon of Hashem, which is what happens when you learn Torah, because you're thinking the Ratzon, and the Ratzon of Hashem is mamish bottled to Hashem Himself. So then it means you are mamish one with Hashem. Then, right? Ki yichud diburoi u'machshavtoi shlakadosh baruch hu b'mehusse ve'atzmusse k'niskalel. Such a oneness, like the oneness that was described in Perek 21, which we learned a few weeks ago, where we talk about that by the Hashem, the dibur speech is not something outside of Him, but it's mamish one with Him. Because nothing is separate. Because it's only felt as something separate if there's a tzimtzum. But if the Ratzon of Hashem is completely revealed, which it is when you're learning Torah, that means your power of thought at that moment, there's no hester pulling, there's no concealment, then it's mamash one with Hashem without any separation. Not that it's something that is both to Hashem, but it's one mamash with Hashem. Yeah? Okay, let's just summarize it before we go on next time. But let's summarize. So, because this is going to be it's a whole build up to. It's really a build up to Perek 25, right? which we're getting to, Mr. Right? So it's like this. So far we've learned as follows. That B'chlal we know is nothing else besides Hashem, right? So we learned in Perek 20 and 21, right? Therefore, when something is really connected to Hashem, it's hard to say that it's two separate things. It's one thing connected to Hashem, it's all one. However, this truth, which is the truth of everything really, everything's part of Hashem, is not felt most of the time because there's a hester upon it, there's tzimtzum, there's concealment, right? That is the power of Hashem, that everything can be truly one with Him, yet He's hidden, right? That's the power of Hashem, the power of the essence of Hashem that can transcend opposites, right? He's here, but he's hidden. That's a very difficult thing, right? That's not something a human being can do. We can hide something, but then the thing is not there, right? It's hidden. If I don't tell you the whole idea that I'm thinking, I only tell you half the idea, then you only got half the idea. You're not really part of the whole idea because I hid it from you. Maybe for me, it doesn't conceal for me, but right? However, with Hashem, it's not like that. In truth, everything is one with Hashem. But there is a tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum is legabeinu, the tzimtzum is for us. So the way we see things, we think that everything is separate from Hashem. And that's why, especially in this world, that's the Dirib Tachtonim, the Tachton. This world is Tachton. Tachton means it's a world which is so low that there's no godly consciousness. That means we don't see ourselves bottled to Hashem at all. Right? However, when you learn Torah, it's different. When you learn Torah... sorry, before we get to that. Which also therefore means that what's shining in the world, what's being revealed in the world, not the Pnimi Saratza. Because Hashem is hiding Himself, at least for us, and therefore what He's fueling that concealment is not what He really wants. He wants to be revealed. Pnimi is Ritzaynai, right? So therefore, we don't, that's already giving us the idea that if we don't connect with Torah mitzvahs, what are we connecting to? Chitzoni Saratzon, or even worse, Acharayim Daratzon, just right where Hashem is really very hidden. We're not getting the full dose of chayus, we're not getting the full dose of life, right? However, when we learn Torah, there the Hashem's Primus Ratzon is mamash begilus, completely revealed. There's no hester upon Him, and therefore even the koiches, the powers, the machshava, and all those things that we use to learn the Torah, are mamash at that point one with Hashem. Because the Primus Ratzon of Hashem is completely revealed, therefore there's no hester upon, there's no concealment, then we're completely one with Hashem. Part of his reality. Okay, we'll learn a bit more about this yichud, about His oneness, and then eventually we'll get to the 25 where we get to the punchline.
That's what I think here.
All right.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You spoke at the very beginning, I think you said that you can come back as an animal.
Yeah, Gilgal, yeah.
Right. So, could you say that the Palestinians might come back as ants or mosquitoes?
They're not coming back at all. They why do they have to come back? They have to go,
Well,
not come
they
back.
need to be punished.
Yeah, but there's